Today with Keith and Steve live and Holly Fuller. Coming up next, Roof Talk with Blair Sutton. Jimmy, let's run the clip and let's get it started.
22 million square feet of Columbus sits under one person's watch. Most of the people inside it have never heard her name. 75 plus properties, 35 plus clients, 100 plus tenants, all in this one market. Holly Fuller oversees property management for CBRE across this market, guiding a team of 110 people who make it work. Her career didn't start with a plan. It started with one nudge and someone who saw something in her first. Holly applied for an apartment leasing role. Within months, she was one of the top agents in the region. Michigan, Florida, back home to Columbus. She managed retail centers across the Midwest as a single mom, then office buildings across the country, then 2 high-rise world headquarters for a Fortune 100 company. After 14 years in one role, she stepped away for 3 months to figure out what came next. That clarity led her to CBRE. There's no single right way to run a property. The right call depends on the owner's wants, even when vendor partners disagree. Today, Holly and Steve are digging into client to service provider relationships. Holly, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Tie-In.
All right, we're back with Steve, Keith, and Holly Fuller this morning on The Tie-In right here live on the Roofing Authority Network. Holly, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here today. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So, Holly, we didn't tell you this, but it's my job at this point to get out of the way because I want to sit back and I want to observe and I want to learn from an awesome conversation that I know you two are going to have. And then, Steve, I'm going to wander back in at some point in about 5 or 6 minutes or so because I got another what if. Like, what if something about the roof leaking stuff? So, Jimmy, get me out of here. I want to be entertained with a great conversation coming up between Holly and Steve.
All right. Holly, I'm so glad that you joined us today. We're going to get into an awesome conversation. You ready?
Ready.
All right. So let's talk about your story a little bit. You know, you were a college student working 2 jobs when your boyfriend's sister, a regional property manager, pushed you to apply for a leasing role. She saw something in you before you even did. So what was going through your head when you said yes, and how fast did it stop feeling like just a job?
Well, let's be honest, right? You're 18. You don't know what the heck you're going to do. I was going to school for nursing, then business, and realized that nursing was not the right route for me. And, she just kind of saw something in me, right? I was working actually at a jewelry store, surprisingly enough, waiting tables, things like that. And she was just like, you have the best personality and, you're so outgoing and, we can teach you all the rest of it, really just come in and let's see what we can do with this. We think you'd be a great fit. And so when I did that and kind of went through it, I was like, okay, I could do this, right? You're really scared or taking a leap. Maybe this is going to be my next forever career. Maybe this is just a job and let's see what happens with it, right? And so I leapt in, 2 feet first and just jumped and went for it. And it was interesting. I feel like what I noticed right off the bat was that I had a lot of the natural abilities, right? Like the detail oriented, those kind of little things that it felt so natural and everything just kind of fell in place. And so really, I just never really looked back. And so to me, I don't think it took long. I feel like it felt like I was home and right where I needed to be. And, looking back, right, it's like almost 26 years later now. And it's like, I still love what I do. And, I continue to grow every day and push myself. So I love it. And it is truly, that one yes made the difference, right? And that set my whole course for my life. So take a chance. You never know.
I love that. I love that. So something that you said that's very interesting. So you were talking about prerequisites. You said that, she saw the personality among other things. Let's dive into that a little bit more. So when it comes to the prerequisites that she saw in you, right? You're a moldable, let's think about it like we're a piece of clay, right? And we're being molded through our lifetime into who we are today and who we're going to become, right? What were those? Dive in a little bit more to what those prerequisites were, that the underlying talents that you had that, through this first role kind of helped those emerge a little bit more.
Yeah, what's interesting, I think a big key component in this industry, right, is customer service first and foremost, and the detail oriented. So those were two things I said, right? And that those things are so key to everything that we do, like at the core, right? And then the just outgoing with that personality. We're a very fast-paced industry, and it's all about relationships and who you know and who you trust and everything else, right? And so having those three things, I think, is really key, and honing into them is really what makes you thrive in what we do every day. I mean, that's really all we do, right?
Yeah.
So, whether we're facing issues or we're just communicating or we're talking bids or, whatever that case is, it all comes down to, that customer service piece of it, understanding that client or understanding the ask. And then two, right, is that communication and that detail oriented of making sure that you're picking up on everything that, that we need. We're clarifying exactly what everything is. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Customer service, communication, detail oriented. I love it. I think it makes so much sense. Let's move on to the next part of your story. So you moved from Michigan to Florida and back to Columbus, where a manager took you under her wing and taught you commercial property management. So at this point, so this is the next stage, right? What did she see in you? And what is the one thing she taught you that you still use today?
So I think for me, it was probably the fact that I was willing to learn, right? And I was just a total sponge. I'm one that I ask a ton of questions. I'm curious. I get in there, right? I want to learn. If there was a vendor, it was let me follow you and ask you a bunch of questions while you're doing something, right? All of that it just feeds you with more and more knowledge, and I think arms you to make you be a better manager. And I think too, just being a go-getter in that sense, that, I'm a self-starter. And I think that was pretty apparent that, nothing was gonna, really hold me back. And I was gonna jump in and, I'm not gonna sit there and wait to be told, what I need to do. I'm just gonna figure it out or ask those questions and learn, right? And just dig in. And I think, you had asked like what maybe the one big thing that she had taught me that I still use today. And I think is so critical in this industry too. And I hear it a lot, even from vendors as well, but just how to write a good like RFP and scope, right? And be extremely clear and extremely forward and just like detailed on it, right? Of exactly what you're looking for, like giving everybody all the same information of what that is and making sure, because then that way you actually do get true numbers back. You're getting good things back that you can compare them, right? Apples to apples. I feel like you see it too often that, everybody's too vague or moving too fast and they just like blanketly throw something out there and say, give me a bid on this, but there's 20 other things in there that you need to make sure that you're covering to make sure that you're getting an actual good scope. So that's one thing that, she instilled in me right off the bat. I still to this day remember that, that she walked me through it on how to write a really good bid and a scope document for it. So
Yep.
I appreciate her for that. And I'm sure others have along the way too, with working with me. So yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. It is music to my ears to hear, a property management professional talking about how important it is to have clear apples to apples scopes. I think we could probably do a whole nother show on, what happens when you don't get clear scopes of work from property management or from a consultant, and you're just left, you're left wondering what is in the details here. And we know what's in the details. The devil's in the details, right? And so, it doesn't do anyone a favor when we have unclear scopes of work. It doesn't do the client a favor, it doesn't do us a favor. Then we're just out of communication. We're having miscommunication, right? And that is not what we want. We want to have clear communication. So I so appreciate you for saying that. And so a theme that kind of ties that last question up was you mentioned being teachable, being a sponge. And so I just want to kind of cement that point home to anyone listening today, is that, being teachable is such a key aspect in our roles as service providers and property managers. So let's, encourage the listeners to embrace being teachable.
Yep. I love it.
So you managed retail centers across the Midwest as a single mom, and then office buildings nationally, then 2 high-rise headquarters for a Fortune 100 company. What changed about the job and about you at each step?
Excuse me. So I think for me, like really each one of those roles or each one of those jobs really stretched me in a different way, right? I got to use different skills kind of at each one. And I think you built on those as I continued to move around and do different aspects of things. I think real quick, you learn efficiencies and organizational skills, because we're moving so fast paced. There's a lot of different things. You're, doing whatever, 200 properties at once, at the one point when I was doing it, it's a lot. And so you learn really quick as far as getting really good and really honed in on those organizational and efficiencies, right, of what you're doing. And then communication and making sure that you're communicating clearly with everything and that you're keeping it all straight. And everybody's all on that same page across the board with, everything that you have going. I think too, that as I continued to progress there, and leading into, when I was managing the headquarters, leadership skills really come into play there with that, because you have to take the reins, right? You have to own it and command the room, if you will, of what's going on. When you have that many contractors doing that much work, you have that many maintenance guys doing so much work, right? You have all the clients on site, you have just all the different partnerships and things moving, and a lot of new moving parts. And so I think having that skill to really be able to take on a lot, handle a lot, command it of what it is, and take that leadership to make sure that, again, like you're kind of your running point on all of it, and making sure that everyone's following in that same direction and everyone's really clear on what that direction is. So that really set me out on a huge path. I think that's really made me successful in this role that I'm in now, because, it teaches you, right, that there's all those different skills and those different styles along the way with everyone that you're working with, no matter who it is, right? From the janitor on up to the CEO, it doesn't really matter, but you have to wear a lot of different hats, and how your communication skills are with that. And you need to be clear on it of setting what those boundaries are and those expectations.
You're hanging out live with Keith Bilous, Holly Fuller, and Steve Reiss this morning on The Tie-In, a brand new show here on the Roofing Authority Network. And we've been talking about roof leaks. We're talking about customer service. But guys, what if you never inspected the roof?
By the time you see it, by the time you see it, it's already been there 6 months. The water didn't start here. It started 40 feet away, traveled a seam, waited.
What if you could see the leak before the ceiling saw it?
Optelos scans the substrate, reads the moisture, sends the map. 6 weeks before the tile turns brown.
Section 12.
Membrane seam. Next Tuesday.
Nothing critical.
Nothing critical.
Dry.
The Tie-In, presented by Optelos.
So Steve, maybe I can jump in and ask Holly a question here. Holly, how common, just curiously as the outsider, how common does this happen?
Roof leaks? Non-stop.
Well, and I'm even thinking about the scene of the fellow walking down the hallway and looking up, and I got to think, oh, not another one, not another one, not another one. Is it like that? Not another one? Is that like the morning? It's like, oh, I got another one, Holly?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think as a property manager, we cringe, right, every time it rains. You guys probably are clapping and ready for it. I'm super excited. But, we cringe, right? Because that just means that that's probably more work. It's more phone calls we got to make. It's, more damage control, right? It's a lot of more communication we got to do. And it just adds to that to-do list for the day. But, we do see them. And honestly, having a good partner at your side is critical for that, right? So that we know that we can call them. We know they're going to come out. We know they're going to fix it right and find out what's happening and have our back in those kind of situations. So having a good partnership for your roofing vendor is critical for sure.
Well, that's awesome. And, I'm so glad that, we can be that resource for you in so many ways, and, be someone that's easy to work with. Right. And so we're going to get into this client to service provider relationship a little bit deeper here. So Holly, you oversee 22 million plus square feet, 75 plus properties, 35 plus clients, and a team of 110, juggling dozens of service provider relationships at once. What actually makes a partnership between a property manager and a service provider work from day one?
So I think one of the big things for me, and this is just my own personal philosophy, I know some managers do it a little different, but I think, I mean, you need to have a strong partnership with them, right? In the thought that I don't like to change vendors constantly. Like, I just don't think that there's any value in it. I think if you have a good partner, you're working with them, you're, massaging what it needs, right? You have clear communication, you set those expectations, you start to learn each other, and you really do kind of lay that groundwork from day one. And I think a lot of it starts, again, going back to just whether it's that RFP, whether it's that first call, whether it's that first kind of conversation that you're having, whatever that case might be, but just making sure that you're both on that same page and that you're working with each other. Because, we rely so heavily on vendors. You're the backbone of our industry, and so without you, we can't do our jobs. So it's, we really rely on you. And so having that partnership and understanding together, I think is critical from right off the bat, and knowing, what I need, what you need, whatever, right? And working between that. So.
Right. So let's dive into that just a little bit deeper. You said clear communication and expectations set right from the beginning. So, in the ideal scenario, I guess, what would that look like, right? Like, let's imagine we're back to day one, and, Holly Fuller says, yeah, Steve, I'd love for you to come out and assess, our leaks. Here's 5 buildings. I need inspections. What would make it a success from day one? Like, what does that getting on the same page and clear communication really look like? Is it a meeting to discuss, here's all of the things that we do, and here's exactly how you're going to do things? Or I guess, how does that look to you? What is the ideal way in your eyes that you see this onboarding, if for lack of a better term?
Yeah. So I know it takes a lot of extra time, right? We're busy, we're moving, we're going in 10 directions, but truly, I think taking that time out of your schedule to walk it together, right? Be there in person, truly look at it together, pinpoint things, look at it, talk through history, talk what's been done before, talk what those pain points are, ask the questions, right? How are you going to handle this? What are you going to do about that? What happens if this happens, right? Having all of those kind of conversations, right? If we do this, what's the domino, right? Or if we don't do that, right, then what's this? I think just setting it off and having that really that talk, I guess, right, in person makes all the difference, versus if I were to just shoot you off a quick email and say, go figure it out, right, and do this, and then it's just kind of like we really haven't built anything, and I don't feel like we're really on the same page of what's happening. And you mentioned something earlier, and I think it's so true, right, that I feel like that gap right there is that missing part. And if we're not in it together and actually in that partnership and talking from day one and looking at things together of what it is, I think we're going to have miscommunication. We're going to have gaps, right? And
every roof.
To have these onboarding conversations.
Absolutely.
Every roof you look up at started down here. Racks, pallets, paperwork, long before the crew ever gets to it.
The tie-in doesn't just cover the crew, it covers the trade. Warehouse to weld, spec to seam. Subscribe.
Segment 3, Keith, Holly, and Steve on the tie-in live this morning on the Roofing Authority Network. Steve, we're wrapping up with Holly this morning. Let's get into some meaning, legacy, and the open industry problem as we're working up on debriefing on the last 15 minutes with you guys. Steve, let me throw it to you to wrap up with Holly here. Where do you want to start with the first closing question with Holly, Steve?
See, where do we want to go? Let's talk about you know, the mentor that
Yeah.
invested in Holly.
Yeah.
I think that would be incredible. Holly, you had a mentor that invested in you and, in hopes that you would do the same for someone else. So leading a team of 110 across property management, admin, engineering, operations, mobile tech, how do you actually guide a team of that size to success?
Very carefully. No, I think one of the big things for me is that you got to get to know your people, right? And understand what makes them tick, get to know them as a person, as a human, as, what their family lives are like, things like that. Frequent check-ins, I think standard, frequent meetings that we have, making sure that everybody's hearing everything all at the same time, right? Same message, same page, clear communication, like we've talked a lot about, and really just clear expectations of kind of what we're looking for, right? Setting that vision, setting that strategy, and making sure that we're all moving on that same track. I think too, like one of the big things is creating the relationships across the board to make sure that they have resources, whether that's amongst their peer sets or cross lines, different buildings, different, kind of aspects, whatever, that they can lean on each other, lean on different experiences with somebody that's speaking that same language of kind of what their roles are. So really creating that space and that environment, that culture to make sure that they have what they need to be successful and succeed in what their roles are, I think is just key. And then I think another piece of it would be, just really promoting and encouraging a lot of that professional development. So, we do a lot of different functions where, we invite different vendors in, right? And we do these lunch and learns where it's, teach us about a roof, teach us about the roofing membranes, how to fix stuff, what to look for, what's key, what's, these different types, whatever, and educate us, right? It's those types of things that I think these guys really appreciate. And you do have folks that are at every stage of their career. And so I think just creating that space, that's that open environment that people can still maybe take another nugget of something, or you have those fresh minds that are just looking to explore, and that's really going to spark those questions, right? It's going to start firing off those cells. So yeah, I think those are all the kind of key things for sure, though, like frequent check-ins and just kind of those mental stands, right? Like, where are you? How you feeling?
Yeah.
How can I support you? What do you need from me? Kind of a thing. How do I remove roadblocks from you so you can get your work done?
Yeah, when you were talking about that, my mind was going to, as a leader, bringing the human element back into the picture, because it's so easy as leaders to be busy, bogged down. We have so many initiatives, we're setting vision, setting strategy, and we can lose that human element with our people, and then thereby lose trust if we're not careful, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say one big key point too that I've learned along the way, and many great leaders that I've had in years past as well have always done this, right? No matter how busy I am, I will stop what I'm doing, right? I will stop what I'm doing, stop my emails, stop the project I'm working on, turn and physically face that person and talk with them, right? And dedicate that time. I'm never too busy for my person. And that's what I think that, for leaders, that's key. I mean, if I could pass that on to all of them, because your people feel that.
I'm never too busy for my person. The quote of the day, Steve Reiss, from our guest Holly Fuller. That's a great quote, Holly. We got to have that one, friend. So, Steve, I'm gonna call an audible here and perhaps throw a question out to both of you. The last question, which is the maintenance trade staffing shortage for both of you guys. And maybe we'll start with Holly, right? Postings draw weak candidates, high no-shows, pay expectations above market, and workers pulled towards data centers and the big developments around, your backyard of Columbus. Holly, starting with you. So in your opinion, what's it going to take to actually fix these challenges today?
Really, we got to get young people into this industry, right? We got to get them excited about the trades. I think for so long it was beat into their head, right? That like the trades are bad. The trades were for the bad kids that couldn't make the grades.
Yeah.
And that's where they ended up because they couldn't cut it in college. And only the college people were getting the good jobs. Well, I've got news for you, right? These jobs are 6 figures a lot of times, right? Of like where you're getting to on some of this stuff for for trades, and it's crazy, and it's good, honest work, and it's stuff that you can take long into the future and into your personal life, everything else. And so, for me, I think it's trying to get kids excited again for it, and getting into those trade schools, getting into the high schools, those community colleges, things like that, and really trying to and pull kids out of that, and then just mentor, right? And treat it as this is an excellent career to get into. We need it desperately. And, you've got to start somewhere and work your way up. And there's a lot of us out here that will really provide that safe landing spot for them and teach them. I mean, we have a ton of resources here at CBRE that, we dedicate towards our maintenance technicians to help them grow, to learn, to teach, hours and hours and hours of hands-on type of training that we can provide. And I know, a lot of other vendors and whatnot around Columbus have those same type of approaches too, which I love. And so, the support's out there. We just got to get them interested and get them in working.
Yeah. Steve, what about you? Same question.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback right off of Holly. That was a fascinating answer. And I wholeheartedly agree. It's all about getting young people into the skilled trades. And so something that the NRCA is doing to, on that front would be they have a program, and it's not NRCA specific, but there's a program called Skills USA, where it is a program where kids compete on a national level from these trade schools all across the board. Doesn't matter what trade. If there's a trade school program from cosmetology to engineering to now roofing. And so we've been on the leading edge of Skills USA, helping the NRCA for the last handful of years with that program and going to the competition that is held in Georgia on an annual basis. And so that's been one way that we've been able to contribute. And not only that, but I would say even right now, like what can I do right now? And I think this is something that we put in place just a couple years ago, is a training program to get the apprentices that are coming into our organization trained up to be a foreman in about 6 months' time. And so we've got a dedicated trainer that is going through the roofing curriculum with these new hires and being able to get them into being from a non-skilled position to a skilled position, which means more money for that individual as well. And so they can support their families and really build a career in the roofing industry, not just a job.
Yeah. Coming up above the line, we're celebrating somebody. You want to stick around for that in about 2 minutes, but we are wrapping up with Holly Fuller. Holly, we're at the end. Can you believe we're at the end of our experience together? Steve, how do we want to wrap up with Holly and walk her out of the lab this morning on the tie-in? Holly, thoughts from you, some closing words from you this morning, Holly?
I think just for me, I would say one, just thank you for including me on today's show. I think this is fantastic. And, again, we love our partnership with Division 7. You guys do a fantastic job for us, and, just appreciate your friendship, Steve. But, truly building that relationship and building that rapport with your vendors are just critical. You got to trust each other, and you got to be on the same team, and you got to really partner and do what you got to do, but you fight for each other as part of it, right? You're in it together. And I think you look at it as that. So, invest in your partnership, and it'll invest right back. So, yep, I love it. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And Holly, thank you so much for accepting the invitation I threw out to you late last week, even on short notice. Really glad that we got to have this conversation. And I see this as the next step forward in that trust building of this relationship, right? And I'm really excited to see what the future holds for us.
Absolutely.
Holly Fuller, where can folks find you, connect with you? Take a quick moment to plug yourself, plug where folks can connect with you along the way outside of the show. Holly, please.
Yeah, so you can find me out on LinkedIn. I'm everywhere. I definitely encourage you to follow me and connect with me out there. As Steve mentioned, I do post a ton of content out there, and you get to see all kind of great things that we're doing, maybe some tips and tricks that you can take back with your own teams and try and implement. But yeah.
Awesome. We got some comments from the community, Holly. Before you leave, we got Mike is making stuff, says contracting, even 1099 is some of the most honest business interactions at their root. Nothing gets assured, and there's real value in that. So we got some engagement from the community. Thanks, Mike, for joining us this morning. Holly, once again, thanks for hanging out with us today. Okay.
Thank you.